Let's try that again. Good morning, guys. Good morning. You know, there's been a lot of, this is exciting stuff. There has been a lot of research done on human attraction. And now, okay, before you get too excited, I'm not talking about romantic attraction. I'm just talking about like general human attraction, like what causes us to be attracted to other people? What causes us to be drawn toward certain people? All right, I want you to think for a second about what causes us to be attracted to other people? Like what causes us to be drawn toward certain people and not other people? Like when you think about all of the possible factors that might be involved in someone being sort of drawn toward another person, maybe physical appearance or common interests, that kind of stuff, what would you guess might be the greatest determining factor in whether or not you will like another person or not? Okay, of all the possible factors, what would you say is the most significant? So I want you to kind of get that in your mind, and then I want you to turn to the person next to you and share what you think. Go. All right. Bring it back. I want to hear some of your ideas on this, and so if you've got one and you feel good about it, just shout it out, Dustin. Odor. Dustin, just so you know, I've always thought you smelled good. Yeah. Okay, what else? If they like you. Okay, all right, good. What else? Humor. Okay, humor. Let's do one more. Dustin's got another one. Dustin, give someone else a chance. Come on. Anybody else besides Dustin? Smile. Rick, is that what you were going to say? What were you going to say? Smile. All right, okay. So it turns out that there's been some research done on this, and there's actually a conclusion. And so are you ready for this? Okay, little drum roll. Dustin's confident that it's odor. The greatest determining factor as to whether you will like someone or not is this: whether or not they like you. Ryan, you are the man. Okay, now I think that in retrospect, that probably makes a lot of sense. Because I don't know about you, I don't really enjoy spending a whole lot of time with people that don't like me. I mean, people that like me, man, like those are good people, man. And even if there's somebody out there and I've never liked that person, and then I find out that they said something good about me, that they like me. So I think, well, you know what? Actually, this person has more going for them than I thought. I mean, this person, obviously they have some hidden qualities that I didn't pick up on right away. Clearly, they have got judgment and discernment that I didn't even know. So, of course, then, the number one factor that determines if you won't like somebody is if they don't like you. Odor. It's back to odor. Dustin can't get away from odor. It's actually, and now that's big, but it's actually if they don't like you. And so if I find out, man, like this person doesn't like me, this person could be like an amazing person in every other respect. Like it could be Mother Teresa, but man, I find out that Mother Teresa doesn't like me, man, she is on my bad list. Something seriously wrong with her, obviously. We all like the people that like us, and we tend to dislike the people that dislike us. Okay, today we come to a section in the Sermon on the Mount where Jesus has a whole lot to say about loving people that don't love us. And these are some very famous words. This is what he says. Matthew chapter 5, verses 38 to 48. He says, "You have heard that it was said, 'Eye for eye and tooth for tooth.' But I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also. And if anyone wants to sue you and take your shirt, hand over your coat as well. If anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with them 2 miles. Give to the one who asks you, and do not turn away from the one who wants to borrow from you. You have heard that it was said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be children of your Father in heaven. He causes his sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. If you love those who love you, what reward will you get? Are not even the tax collectors doing that? And if you greet only your own people, what are you doing more than others? Do not even pagans do that? Be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect. So Jesus finishes this challenge by pointing out the obvious. Human nature is to love those that love you and to hate those that hate you. Jesus says, look, like even the pagans, okay, people that don't know God or love God, even pagans love the people that love them. What credit is it to you if you're only good to people that are good to you? Now, sometimes Christians get confused about this, and they assume that Jesus is talking about preferences. Because as human beings, we're all like uniquely wired by God. We all have preferences. And this is simply a part of you being you, okay? It's not right or wrong, it just is. And so, little quiz here. How many of you like sushi? Raise your hand high if you like sushi. Okay, hands down. Raise your hand high if you hate sushi. All right, okay. See, it's not a sin to dislike or to like sushi. It's a preference thing. Okay, another one. How many of you like watching sports on TV? Yes, okay. Hands down. How many of you don't like watching sports on TV? All right, it is not a sin to like or dislike sports on TV. How many of you like cats more than dogs? Ooh. How many of you like dogs more than cats? I can see what kind of church we are. Just so you know, it is not a sin to prefer either cats or dogs. Okay? How many of you like country music? It's kind of a bad example because it turns out that country music actually is a sin. Says so in Second Hesitations, I think. Okay, look, we all have preferences, okay? We all prefer certain things and not others. And this is going to be for you, this is going to be true of people as well. You will prefer certain people to other people, and there is nothing wrong with that. It's not a sin. And Jesus is not saying here, somehow you have to enable yourself to feel equally warm and fuzzy about everybody that you ever encounter in your life. But Jesus is saying that it is right and it is good to show love to everybody. Like even if they're not our favorite. Like even if we're not their favorite. Like even if they don't show love to us. He's saying it's not about warm and fuzzy feelings, but it's about kindness being expressed. Okay? But the concepts here that he comes, the turning the other cheek and the going the extra mile and the giving the shirt off of our back have been horribly misunderstood over the years. And a lot of times people look at these statements that Jesus makes and they look at them and they go, it just leads to a sense of despair. And they think, you know what, Jesus is telling me that I just have to be like a doormat. Like if someone hits me, I have to not fight back and just keep letting them hit me. And I always have to give somebody whatever it is that they want, like no matter what. And so this might be like nice stuff in theory, but the reality is it doesn't work in real life. And so I'm sure that Jesus meant well, okay, but he obviously didn't understand life in the real world. And so can I just say something, guys? Jesus understood the real world. He understood this world on a level that no other person ever has. He understood human realities, and he understood human complexities, and he understood all different kinds of moral dilemmas. He understood better than anyone how life is meant to be lived. He understood what human beings really need. He understood what deadens our hearts. He understood what causes our hearts to come alive. Okay, these are not the words of a dreamer, someone that's like out of touch with reality. The truth is, the words of Jesus here are life. They are the way to life. But to experience life through them, we have to get the point. We have to understand what he's actually getting at and what he actually wants us to do. So I want us to go back to the context. And we've been talking about this for several weeks. But Jesus was going around and he was healing people, like day after day, place after place. You know, the deaf, the blind, okay, those with leprosy. And he would deliver people that were demon-possessed. Like this actually happened. This really happened. And then in the midst of the healing, he would always stop to teach. So he'd show them the kingdom at work among them in all of the healings. And then he would tell them, okay, repent, for the kingdom of heaven has now come near. In other words, life together with God, in God's favor, in God's presence, that life has now become available on earth to ordinary people. That realm where things are as God wants them to be is now being made manifest right here, right now. So he would say to people, it is all around you and it is available to you, and any one of you can enter into it now if you wish. And so Jesus would teach this idea over and over, place after place. And one day, Jesus takes a break from all of the healings, and he goes up on a hillside and he sits down to teach. And he uses breathtaking words to paint pictures, illustrations of what life in the kingdom might look like. How people that are aligning themselves with God and God's dream for humanity, how those people might actually live. How they might approach the realities and the complexities of ordinary, average, everyday life. Okay, but we have to understand these pictures, like the turn the other cheek and this give the shirt off your back and the go the extra mile. These are not commands that he's giving to be followed mindlessly. They're illustrations of how we might treat people that don't treat us well. How we might learn to love people that don't love us. And so what I want us to do is kind of take a few minutes and walk carefully through just a couple of these illustrations in this passage so that we can get our minds around what Jesus is saying as well as what Jesus is not saying. Okay, so here we go. Matthew 5:38. He says, "You have heard that it was said, eye for eye and tooth for tooth." Now Jesus here is quoting right out of the Old Testament. This is from Exodus chapter 21, the law that God gave to Moses. Now some people hear these words and the response is, eye for eye and tooth for tooth. Like, really? That sounds barbaric. I mean, why would God say that? Why would God command that? Why would that ever make its way into the Bible? And that's a very legit question, okay? So let's start right there. Imagine human life in its earliest days, like the most ancient of civilizations. There's very little government structure. There's no constitution. There's no justice systems. It's every man for himself. Okay? You hurt me, so what do I want to do to you? I want to hurt you back. And this is human nature, right? I mean, think about this. Do we have to teach kids this stuff? Like, are our children naturally just nonviolent little pacifist Gandhis? They're not, okay? It's natural. This, you hurt me, I hurt you. And how much will I hurt you? Well, I will hurt you as much as I want and as much as I think I can get away with. You think about this. Why do we need adults back with our toddlers? Can you imagine what would go on back there without some authority? I mean, the tyranny, the toy stealing, the hitting, the biting, it would be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Because you don't have to teach kids this stuff, okay? It takes everything that we've got to teach them not to do this stuff. Like, what happens when a Crip kills a Blood? Well, the Bloods kill a Crip to get even, and usually more than one. And this is how it works in our world. Now, thankfully, we have police, right? And we have laws. But think about a world where there are no laws to prevent that stuff. There's no police to oppose it. There's no courts to punish it. Okay, that's the ancient world. And one day, into that world comes this law from God. Okay, eye for eye, tooth for tooth. And he was not teaching that you should always try to get revenge. He was saying that there needs to be a limit to retribution. There needs to be a limit to retaliation. It was saying, look, if somebody knocks out your tooth, you don't just go kill them. It was teaching about justice. It was saying that there ought to be a proportional level of retribution. Because maybe you've noticed that retribution always seems to escalate. Like you punch me in the arm, I'm telling you, don't do this, but if you punch me in the arm, when I punch you back, I will hit you harder than you hit me. And here's a big part of why that happens. The pain inflicted on me always feels more severe to me than the pain that I inflict on someone else. Okay, there's all kinds of research around this too. This is interesting. One study took a group of subjects and they paired them up in twos. And people would receive pressure, okay, against their finger. And then they were told to exert the equal amount of pressure on someone else's finger. And guess what? They always inflicted more pain than they received. Like always, in every case. You know why? Because pain received is greater than pain inflicted. Now, I want to demonstrate this in a way that you guys will remember for the rest of your lives. And so, everybody stick out your index finger for just a second. And I want you to take a look at it. And I want you to make it as rigid as you can. Okay, and when you've got it and it's fully rigid, I want you to poke it in the eye of the person next to you. Okay, we live in a world where the rule is you hurt me and I'll hurt you. And usually I'll hurt you more. Okay, but Jesus is saying here, okay, now in me, with my help, there's another option for human life. And so he then paints some pictures of what these options might look like, how this might look like lived out in practical everyday life. And this was stuff from their everyday world. Okay, here's what it might look like, Jesus was saying, that here's what it might look like to not live by tooth for tooth. And the first one is very well known. I mean, we all know this one. Verse 39, but I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also. Now, guys, Jesus is not saying, and I cannot say this strongly enough, he is not saying that if somebody starts hitting you, you have to just keep on letting them hit you until they either wear themselves out or decide to stop. He's describing a very specific situation that his audience knew all about. This is a picture of what would happen in their society, this little backhanded slap, kind of a light little backhanded slap. And it was very much a part of their culture. And this backhanded slap was a sort of public insult. Okay, and everyone in his audience knew about this. The intent of the slap was to shame another person publicly. So let's be clear about this, okay? This is not a picture of a fist fight. Jesus is not saying that, like, if you're in an abusive situation, maybe, especially a physically abusive situation, you're just supposed to sit around enduring the abuse. You can stand up for yourself. You can protect yourself. You can involve justice. You can walk away from the situation. You don't have to keep abused, citing to yourself, well, I guess I just have to sit here and take it. Jesus tells me so. Jesus is not telling you so. Okay, this description, this illustration is about insults. It's not about fistfights. And so Jesus is saying, okay, let's say you become my follower. And you're trying to live in the reality of the kingdom, and somebody comes along and insults you with this little backhanded slap. What should you do? Jesus says, well, here's what you don't do. You don't retaliate and try to insult them back. You refuse to return insult with insult. You break the cycle of hurt for hurt, eye for eye, tooth for tooth. You do something different. Jesus is saying, look, okay, your ultimate safety and well-being are not in the hands of those that oppose you. They're not. They're in the hands now of your heavenly Father. And your honor and your dignity are also in his hands, and he will defend you, and he is working for you on your behalf. Now, maybe you would look at that and you'd say, okay, well, all right, whatever. Jesus tried that, right? And it didn't work out too well for Jesus. I mean, people insulted him, and they arrested him, and they told lies about him, and he didn't fight back, and he didn't defend himself. And in the end, if you know the story, Pastor, in the end, they beat him and they killed him. So it didn't really work out for him now, did it? I say, okay, all right, good point. But that's not really the end of the story, is it? I mean, God raised Jesus from the dead, and he took him to heaven. And now, like millions of people are gathering, like 2,000 years later, like today in 2014, on today, there are millions of people gathering all over the globe to honor the name of Jesus, okay, to worship Jesus. And, a little side thing, he will rule everything now for all of eternity. I don't know. My thought is, you know what? I think in the end, God had Jesus back. Okay. And God seems to have this way of, in the end, vindicating those who refuse to live by this eye for eye, tooth for tooth approach. A few weeks ago, if you were here, we talked about Martin Luther King Jr. We talked about his commitment to loving his enemies. You know, not turning the struggle that was going on, that very intense struggle, into this us versus them battle, but actually embracing the idea of brotherhood, of blacks and whites living together in harmony. Now, where do you think he got that idea? And there were lots of civil rights leaders that preached a message of hate. But you think about those famous words of Dr. King. You think about the picture that he painted. Okay, I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day right here in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. Friends, that's a vision that changed our country. Now, where do you think Reverend King got those ideas? I think of another man that lived this out in a powerful way. I think of Jackie Robinson, the first African American to ever play Major League Baseball. Now, we took our kids to see, over the summer, we took our kids to see the movie 42. How many of you saw the movie 42? Jackie Robinson's story. Man, what an incredibly powerful movie. And some of you may not know the story. You may not know that Branch Rickey, okay, the owner of the Brooklyn Dodgers, actually went looking for the right man to break the color barrier. He needed a great player with exceptional inner strength. And after looking and looking and looking and searching and putting his scouts out on this, he decided to ask Jackie Robinson to be that guy. But from the beginning, he was very honest about what this would take. And there's a great scene in the movie 42 with Branch Rickey, okay, played by Harrison Ford, sharing this vision with Jackie Robinson. Let's watch this. So Jackie Robinson went out and he actually lived out that vision. And he changed the game forever. He changed our country forever. And today, some of you know, his name is highly honored. For one day every year in Major League Baseball, every player wears number 42 to remember and honor Jackie Robinson. But he lived through a kind of hell that seemed unbearable at the time. And yet God has this unexpected way of vindicating people in the end. Using people who refuse to live by eye for eye, tooth for tooth. Using them to bring our world into conformity with his will. Using them to help earth look more and more and more like heaven. Okay, now the next two illustrations from Jesus are not just about not hurting back, They're about doing good for people that they're oppressing you. Okay, so verses 40 and 41. Jesus says, if anyone wants to sue you and take your shirt, hand over your coat as well. If anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with them 2 miles. And the idea in both of these pictures is doing more than what's required. Someone is making unreasonable demands on you, but instead of resisting them, you actually offer more to them than they're asking. And Jesus says, okay, someone wants to sue you for your shirt. Here's an idea that's like way outside the box. What if, go with me now, what if you offered them your coat as well? What would that communicate about who you are? How shocking would that be? I mean, can you imagine? Okay. But this was absolutely not a command to always give people whatever it is that they demand from you in court. And we talked about this idea a few weeks ago. Sometimes you need to fight for justice. You need to. I mean, for instance, sometimes other people's well-being are at stake, or it just doesn't make sense. I mean, sometimes you have to defend other people. Now, there are Christians that have decided not to fight for their parental rights. I mean, they read this passage and they go, clearly, I have to let whoever's taking me to court have whatever they want. And so, like after a divorce, if their ex takes them to court in anger, they think, well, you know what? I have to give my ex whatever they ask for. Jesus says so. So they give away all their parental rights? The kids have to lose a parent? Like, that is totally wrong. And that's not at all what Jesus is saying. You go to the extra mile reference, and it's similar. Again, for Jesus, everybody in his audience knew about a specific situation that he was describing. And if you were here a few weeks ago, we talked about this one as well. But Israel was occupied territory. Okay, Rome was their oppressor. And a Roman soldier was allowed by law to force an occupant of any occupied territory, okay, in this case, a Jew in Israel, to force them to carry the soldier's pack or the soldier's gear for up to 1 mile. Okay, so you envision that. You're a Jew, you're minding your own business, you're going about your day, and all of a sudden a Roman soldier comes up and grabs you and says, all right, you're going to carry my stuff for 1 mile. Can you imagine how angry you'd be? Can you imagine the sense of injustice involved in experiencing that? But Jesus says, okay, what do you do in that situation? Roman soldier makes you carry his burden 1 mile. But Jesus says, think about this. Maybe it's just a boy himself. Maybe 18. From another part of the world. He doesn't want to be here. Doesn't have a whole lot of money himself. He's hated here. And all he gets from the people he's around is hatred day after day. Jesus says, so he makes you carry his pack for up to 1 mile. Now here's an idea, just an idea. After you finish that mile, what if you looked at him in the eye and you said to him, you know what? You look pretty tired. And I'll bet that life here is pretty hard. So could I give you a little more help? Could I go with you another mile? And Jesus is saying, can you imagine how that would blow somebody's mind? Like, nobody does that kind of stuff. That is crazy. But again, Jesus is not giving us a law here. He's not saying that, even if the soldier says, well, no, I was planning on stopping right here, that you got to say, well, Jesus said I have to take it another mile. So we got to go another mile no matter what. You guys, this is really important. Jesus was not giving us a new legalism. This is not more really hardcore rules to follow in every situation. He's giving us creative illustrations of how we might live if we're serious about getting beyond this eye for eye, tooth for tooth approach to life. And this week I was struck by how important this is. I was thinking hard about what God is trying to do on earth. His dream for humanity and our role in it. And there was a tragic situation that happened that just sort of got my mind going, got my wheels turning in all sorts of directions this week. On Monday, a 14-year-old boy named Quinn committed suicide. Now, he's a freshman at Kamiak, and he's a longtime friend of my daughter, Kate. And the two of them had gone to school together since kindergarten, and they were all the way back to kindergarten. They were part of the same inner circle. And in this fall, they actually went to homecoming. They just went as friends, but they went with the big group and did the big group homecoming thing. And I knew Quinn. I had coached him in baseball a little bit, and he was a good kid, good ball player. And I got to know his dad, his family a little bit over the years. And he and his family were not strangers to our family. But on Monday night, he committed suicide. And nobody knows why. You know, he wasn't being bullied at school. He was a good athlete. He's a good student. He's a popular kid. There's just no good explanation for this. And so I picked up Kate from school on Tuesday, and I was just getting her to take her somewhere, and she got in the car and she told me what happened, and she just started weeping. And I was just stunned. And so all week long, I've just been thinking about this kid and his family. And I've been thinking about his dad because we kind of got to be friends. And I just thought, oh God, what must he be going through? And I was just thinking about how much pain that entire family is in. Quinn's sister and his mom and his dad and grandparents. I can't even imagine. And so I was driving, and I was heading somewhere. I was driving by myself, and I started to pray. And it got me thinking about God's heart in all of this. And I just started thinking about how God's heart is so broken over all of this. And I thought about the tears being shed in heaven. And then I had this really random thought pop into my mind. And I realized that while God and all of the angels are grieving over this, there is just weeping and unbelievable pain in heaven. There are other forces that aren't grieving at all. Now, I don't know, but I don't like to think about this stuff, and I rarely do. But this just sort of came to my mind as I was driving, and I thought, you know what? There are forces. There are dark forces in our world that act behind the scenes. And it just occurred to me, and I don't know why it occurred, but it did, that those forces are actually rejoicing over this. They're watching all of this pain, and they're celebrating it. And while God is in the business of healing, and he's in the business of grace, and he's in the business of kindness, there are forces that are hell-bent on destruction, on pain and suffering. And those forces are active and they are present in our world. God and the angels are about peace and about joy and about love and life. But those forces are about hate, and they're about despair, and they're about hopelessness. They are about everything that is anti-God. And for some reason, in that moment, as I was praying and I was driving in my car, I just had this moment of clarity about something that I don't really think about much. And it became clear to me in that moment that we're living in a war zone. We were living in a world that is caught in between two kingdoms. And the enemy in this war is never, ever, ever other people. Because all of us essentially are simply children of war. And we've all been wounded, and we've all been scarred. And we have to decide what our lives are going to be about. There is a war going on. And at any moment, we can kind of fight on one side or the other. We can perpetuate hate and despair, and or we can perpetuate love and hope. We can hurt those that hurt us, or we can do everything in our power to stop the cycle of hurt and pain. But we have to get kind of clear. We have to decide, which side are we on? And one of the reasons I think that Jesus is so extreme, one of the reasons that he's challenging us to such a radical life, is because those kingdoms were not something that he only thought about a couple of times in his life. Those kingdoms were so real to him that he could hardly stand it, and he was trying to help people understand, and he would talk about it all the time. And he would talk about it all the time because for him, the stakes were just off the charts. Okay, he wasn't a dreamer, and he wasn't out of touch with reality. He was the only person ever that was fully in touch with reality. And he understands that the hope of the world, okay, the only hope of the world is transformed hearts. It's people learning to live in a new reality, in a new kingdom. People learning to live with a radical kind of love. That is the only hope for our world. Okay, our world will not be redeemed ultimately by a better economic system. It will not be redeemed by better education or a different political arrangement. Those things are really important. But ultimately, you think about gangs and violence and wars. You think about ethnic cleansing, broken homes, shattered hearts. What is it that's ever going to heal that? Well, it's the way that says, okay, the evil, the hurt, the cycle of hostility, it's going to stop with me. It just comes down to what Jesus said, you and me being salt and light. Now, our life situations will be different. You probably aren't going to get slapped by somebody this week. Hopefully, nobody's going to sue you for your coat. It's not likely that a soldier's going to come up to you and demand that you carry his stuff for a mile. But you will have all kinds of opportunities, and so will I. And when that happens, when you get hurt, or when you get insulted, or when you get mistreated, I just want to encourage you to think of a simple little phrase. And the phrase is this: here's my chance. Here's my chance. And the idea is that in each moment when there's something difficult, whether it's relational problems or somebody hurts you or somebody needs you, they need something from you, you can just pause and you can say, all right, here's my chance. When you get hurt or insulted or overlooked or mistreated, you can say, you know what? I don't have to live a you hurt me, I hurt you kind of life. Because now, see, in Jesus, another way has come, and it is a better way. And I don't have to be a part of the mutual hostility that is destroying our world. It can stop. And I can let go. And I can actually extend kindness to people that aren't kind to me. And so if that happens to you this week, this happens to you this month, I just want you to remember a little phrase: here's my chance.